Following the horrific attack in Boulder, Colorado, and significant developments here in the Middle East, we'll have a security briefing from Lt.Col Eyal Dror, and then hear from a leading voice on Israel and Zionism, Dr. Einat Wilf, from the Stand With Us studios in Jerusalem. I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Special Briefing. Shalom from Israel. Over 610 days since Hamas waged war on Israel, we'll be joined in the studio by Lt.Col Eyal Dror, who played a key role in the Good Neighbor mission, delivering life-saving aid to Syrian civilians during the country's civil war, to discuss humanitarian aid to Gaza and other issues. But first, what happens when lies are repeated often enough? They become a weapon, and not just a rhetorical one, but a deadly one. On June the 1st in Boulder, Colorado, a group of Jewish people and their non-Jewish allies gathered for a peaceful march to raise awareness for Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. They weren't protesting, rioting, or threatening anyone. They were standing up for human rights, for life. And then, Molotov cocktails, firebombs, followed by screams of "Go to hell, Zionists, and you all deserve to die." Let's not mince words. This was terrorism. The attacker Mohammed Sabri Suleiman tried to murder Jews in broad daylight. He'd been planning the attack for over a year. 15 people were injured, among them a Holocaust survivor, someone who'd already survived the worst evil the world has known. And this happened not in 1945, but in 2025. The horror in Boulder came just days after another brutal act of anti-Semitic terrorism. In Washington, D.C., Yaron Lachinsky and his partner Sarah Milgram were murdered by a terrorist who shouted "Free Palestine" and "Intifada Revolution" after murdering them. See the pattern? These attacks come at a time when misinformation about what is really going on in Gaza is at an all-time high, when the memory of what happened on October the 7th, the reason that there is a conflict, is being trampled on, and when Hamas propaganda is being taken as truth. This is not just dishonest, it's dangerous. The demonization of Israel and Jews, the blood libels dressed up as criticism, have consequences. These attacks in Boulder and Washington are not isolated. They're the byproduct of a toxic environment where truth is sacrificed and hatred is excused, so long as the target is Israeli or Jewish. We hear from talking heads, TV hosts, politicians and podcasters, even comedians, that Israel is doing the wrong thing. Of course, they're very quick to condemn Israel, but don't offer suggestions of what Israel should do. That's because they don't have them. And for some, it's because rather than seeing Israel defend themselves, they prefer to see the Jewish state defenseless. Well, we know where being defenseless gets us, and we know what propaganda and demonization leads to. We're seeing that play out right now. So this is a moment for moral clarity, a time to pick a side, time for the silent majority to raise its voice, a moment to stand firmly with truth and humanity, to stand with peace seekers like Sarah and Yaron, and with those who march for the release of the hostages in places like Boulder, and to stand with the Jewish community, because what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And if we don't call this out loudly and clearly and consistently, who will? The IDF announced that 4 soldiers were killed in an explosion in a booby-trapped building during the ongoing operation against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The fallen are Sergeant First Class Tom Rothstein, age 23, Staff Sergeant Uri Yonatan Cohen, 20, Staff Sergeant Yoav Raver, 19 years old, and Sergeant Major in Reserves Chen Gross, 33 years old. In addition, IDF heroes Master Sergeant Alon Farkas, Master Sergeant Omer Van Gelder, and Staff Sergeant Lior Steinberg, just 20, were killed in the last week of operations against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. In a moving act of humanity, their families chose to donate their organs, bringing the gift of life to others, even in the face of heartbreaking loss. Hostage Natapong Pinta from Thailand, who was 36 years old when he was kidnapped from kibbutz near Oz into Gaza on October 7, 2023, and then murdered in captivity, has been recovered by the IDF from Gaza. This follows another recovery of fellow murdered hostages Judy Weinstein Hagai and Gadi Hagai, brought back to Israel for a dignified burial. In the wake of a series of devastating anti-Semitic terror attacks over the past few weeks, including the murders of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram outside the Washington Jewish Museum and a brutal assault in Boulder, Colorado, the FBI and U.S. Department of Homeland Security have issued warnings about heightened threats to Jewish and Israeli communities across the country. The IDF has announced the elimination of the head of the Palestinian Mujahideen terror group in Gaza. He was responsible for the kidnapping of Judy Weinstein Haggai and Gadi Haggai, as well as the kidnapping and murder of Shiri Bibas and her two young sons, Ariel and Kfir. Well, joining us now is a seasoned expert in Israel's defense and humanitarian operations. With over 30 years of service in the IDF, he's played a key role in the Good Neighbor mission, delivering life-saving aid to Syrian civilians during the country's civil war. He's also the author of the newly published book, Embracing the Enemy, the inside story of Israel's secret humanitarian mission to rescue Syrian civilians from civil war. Lt.Col Eyal Dror, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Great to have you with us. And no one better to talk to us about the situation unfolding right now in Gaza. You know more than anyone what it takes to deliver humanitarian aid to civilians while being at war with the place that they're from. So tell us what your take is on what's going on right now and the importance of the new Gaza Humanitarian Fund.
So I think that what has been happening in the last 2 weeks is a game changer in Gaza, humanitarian aid delivered. The problem with how it works until now, and we should understand that, when Hamas got the humanitarian aid, because the NGOs were working, however, Hamas was controlling that. He stole it. He sold it with high amount of money, meaning he could have paid to his terrorist people. He was the organization that decided who will eat and who will not. Means if you put something on TikTok against Hamas, you won't get your flour. Today, it has been changed, finally. It means that Hamas is not a part of this game anymore. There is an organization that entered the Gaza, secured by the IDF. And now, first of all, we can know that people we need will get the food, the civilians, the innocent people, so-called, they will be able to eat. It doesn't matter whether you support Hamas or you don't support Hamas. So it's make a huge change. How do you know in the Middle East that it's causing change? Hamas is shooting them. Hamas is not allowing. Hamas is trying to interrupt this mission. Hamas is shooting the people, the civilians, its own civilians that is coming to get, because Hamas knows better than anyone that it might be the end of Hamas when he is not controlling the humanitarian aid.
And so what you read, when you see all these reports going on about, is on the one hand, the humanitarian fund is supplying aid, but you see such harsh criticism coming at it from the UN, from international bodies, from politicians, from the media. Why do you think that is?
Double standard, you can call it. Not understanding the Eastern culture. We are trying to make this on our Western values. There is a war. People do not have much food. From our point of view, our values is let's feed the people. They are victims of war. This is not what is going on in Gaza. Hamas is controlling that. Hamas will prevent the humanitarian aid. So the pressure that the UN and countries put on Israel while they criticize Israel make the war longer, cause more casualties to the Palestinians and to the Israelis because the war is going on. Just imagine if that scenario would have happened a year ago, the war probably would have been ended because Hamas wouldn't have any other choice. When the people in Gaza realized that Hamas is not the only party that taking control, they will resist. You can see it in the last days, how people is shouting against Hamas and how brutally Hamas treated to his own people. They know exactly what will be the next stage. It will be very quickly if the Western world will understand the situation and will not try to put his Western values, the democratic values, which I appreciate and you appreciate, but this is not the values that you can work it in Gaza, unfortunately.
So this weekend we got a statement from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I'll read it out to you. This is the group that is delivering the aid into Gaza. And they said, Hamas is the reason hundreds of thousands of hungry Gazans were not fed today. The group issued direct threats against GHF operations. These threats made it impossible to proceed today without putting innocent lives at risk. Hamas wants to return to a broken system it once controlled and exploited, diverting aid, manipulating distribution, and putting its own agenda ahead of the Palestinian people's basic needs. However, GHF will not be deterred. We remain committed to a safe, secure, and independent aid delivery, and we're actively adapting our operations to overcome these threats and fully intend to resume distributions without delay. Your reaction to that statement by the Humanitarian Foundation?
I just try to think what it will, if the state of Israel would have published such an announcement immediately, all the world would have condemned Israel. But hey, those guys are not Israelis, and they are telling the truth. Who is going to be afraid from hearing the truth? Why the world, the enlightened world, do not understand and do not realize what these guys, they are only a week in Gaza, and they immediately realize. Why? Because they've seen it. They've seen how the people of Hamas is shooting the Palestinians in order not to allow them to get this food. They know that the only organization that earn from the former aid supply is only Hamas. And this is exactly what we said before. When they are controlling it, they will control the population, they will control their people because they will be able to pay them salaries. When they are out of the game, they have a problem. I'm so happy for this announcement being published, not by Israel, by an objective organization. And I do hope and do pray that people in the West will hear that. It might bring this war to a close end.
And we know that Hamas does take reciprocal action against Palestinians. They've done it for always, for the duration of their rule, really harsh punishments for Palestinians, killing Palestinians if they don't think they're towing the line. They just put out recently on the chat app Telegram a whole channel showing what they call collaborators, what they do to Palestinians who, for instance, are cooperating with this organization or stand up against Hamas because they want to warn against these kind of actors. So we know what Hamas is like. Given this backdrop and this background, we saw an amazing operation this week from IDF soldiers. They went in and they rescued the bodies of deceased, or rather murdered, Israeli hostages in Gaza. They brought them home for a dignified burial. What can you tell us about that operation?
This operation and the former operation, because this is not the first one that Israel succeeded to rescue bodies and alive hostages. It's, I think, a phenomena. It's something that I don't know any army in the world that can do such an accurate work. Just try to understand the meaning of a body digged in a tunnel 40 meters under the ground. A year and a half ago, the area has been changed. Buildings has been destroyed around. The topography has been changed. Now, in the tunnel itself, if I will hide a pen in this room, and I will tell you a month after, try to fix to find it, it will be hard. Just imagine how hard it is to find these bodies, how accurate is the intelligence work. Without getting into much details, you need to talk with the person, for example, that buried these bodies, because his friends will not know. They will tell you, okay, it's in this tunnel. However, it's a huge tunnel. We know that there is hundreds of meters on a couple of levels, 3, 4 floors. You need to arrive to the exact point where those bodies were hidden. And in addition, I will say that it is not an area that you don't have an enemy. Hamas is still in those areas. Those terrorists are hiding. They know that the IDF want to reach to those bodies, so they can ambush the IDF. They can use civilians as, for example, observers that give us, they know that the IDF will not hit a child, but then this child role will to inform Hamas, I know that there is IDF soldiers all over around, so it's difficult 10 times more even. And I think it's a piece of art, and this is our the values. The IDF, and we declared it, we will not leave Gaza until the last one of the 55 hostages, live and dead, will be brought back home. This is our values. This is what we are educating our soldiers. This is our values, and this is how we educate our children before getting into the IDF.
And we pray that will happen soon. You oversaw the operation named Good Neighbor, which during the Syrian civil war brought humanitarian aid, brought Syrians in for medical care in Israel. Tell us about that, please.
So Operation Good Neighbor started in 2016, after 3 years that Israel evacuated 3,500 Syrians to be treated in Israel hospitals. Israel decided that we want to reach to as many people as we can. Those were, I will say it in Arabic, those were the regions of Quneitra and Daraa, which are the very close regions to the Israeli border. We found an opportunity to reach and to connect for the first time in the modern history with the Syrian civilians. And we knew that if they will see us, they will realize that we are not what they have been educated for years. We are not their enemies. We don't want to conquer the land. Operation Good Neighbor, which I was privileged to serve as its commander, reached to over than 200,000 human beings, Muslims, Sunnis. We brought to Israel children, over than 1,400, and we support their clinics, their hospitals. We even help them to build a maternity hospital. We provide them food and even clothes. And you know, when you're a refugee living in a tent in an area that there is snow, a coat is a life-saving. So this was, in general, the mission of Operation Good Neighbor, and I will rephrase it. Our mission was to build bridges between Israelis and Syrians.
And so during the course of that operation, you did tremendous work. Why is it important to the state of Israel to run an operation like that, similar to its allowing humanitarian aid going into Gaza? Why does Israel act in this way? Some objective people might say it's even self-defeat.
I think that as Israelis, we are committed to our values. I think that as Jewish people that survived the Holocaust, we cannot close our eyes when there is a massacre, when it's true genocide on the other side, on the fence. And it is not Aleppo, which is 300 miles from the border. It's on the border itself. So Israel said that according to our values, we need to help them. And like I said before, we realized that there is also the opportunity to save life, and by doing that, to make them see us in different point of view. And I think that we succeeded, because when they entered Israel, they finally met Israelis, not the Jewish. They met the Israelis.
And so you did this incredible work, and of course you're an expert in everything that's going on in the north. Tell us what the situation is now. I want to talk about Syria in a moment, but before we do, the threats still remain in Lebanon, for instance. The threat still remains. It's all coming from Iran. And of course, even in the last week, talking about regional threats, we have had continued rocket fire, I should say ballistic missile fire, from Yemen. Talk to us, please, about those continued threats.
So I think that what happened during, after October 7 massacre, I do believe that Israel succeeded. Although the threats and the challenges you just mentioned, Israel succeeded to change the strategic map. The Shiite axis suffered from a huge hit. Hezbollah, yeah, they're still existing. Yes, there is still thousands of terrorists, and they have plenty of ammunition. However, they have been defeated. I claim that in the Middle East, when you are in politics, there is a lot of kinds of gray. In a war, there is black or white. You won, you lost. Hezbollah lost. Now, it doesn't matter that I will tell you, Michael. What is important is the Lebanese people saying that, and you can see it all over the social media and even programs in TV, while politicians talking about the defeat of Hezbollah. Hezbollah wasn't so weak in the last 30 years, and this has been happened according to the IDF attacks. Perfect intelligence, which make us to eliminate the chain of command, both political and military chain of command, to reach to their places and to destroy it. So the threat is still existing. However, we reduce it dramatically. I came back home after 16 months away from home. I
You
succeeded
live in the north of Israel.
I'm-
You were evacuated like many tens of thousands of people.
like 60,000 Israelis. Our home is a mile from the border, from the Lebanese border, and we were evacuated. We came back home 4 months ago after my wife, she is not a military expert, but she realized that the threat today is less. She realized what the Israelis realized, that Hezbollah do not have now any will to attack Israel. He is suffering hard in Lebanon, and the population of Lebanon condemn it. And I think that this is the biggest victory. Of course, we still have the Houthis. Of course, Iran is still existing, which I think it will be a dramatically mistake if it will be signed any agreement with them. They want to earn some more time. This is the perfect time now to eliminate completely what we call the Shiite radical axis.
You tell the story of the amazing operation in your book, Embracing the Enemy. I have the book here. It's an amazing read. You published it in Hebrew and English. I know it's going to be translated into Arabic. How come?
So it's going to be translated to Arabic and, inshallah, in God will, for another couple of languages. I think that Operation Good Neighbor is not only a story that Israelis should hear. I think that any human being, it doesn't matter which language it talks, should read it. I think it can give an opportunity to people, first of all, to see who are the Israelis, to understand why Israeli soldiers were willing to risk their lives and to put our lives under severe danger in order to save people that were enemies, people that were living in an enemy country. And I think people can realize after reading the book how you can build trust, how you can build bridges between enemies. It should give optimistic to some people in this world.
And it's amazing that at this time when Israel is facing such criticism, it really shows the true nature of what Israel really is. We cut through all of those media headlines and see that actually they're the ones seeking peace and seeking equality and seeking a better region for all of us. Lt.Col Eyal Dror, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for your analysis. Embracing the Enemy is out right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you with us on Stand With Us TV. The book, Embracing the Enemy, is out now. You can order it. And before I introduce our next guest, did you know that today is Stand With Us Day? As we celebrate our 24th anniversary, you have a chance to show your appreciation for the work of Stand With Us on campus, in high school, in the community, and on social media. Every donation made this week is doubled by a generous supporter. So please take a moment to celebrate Stand With Us by giving generously. Go to StandWithUs.com and click on the Stand With Us Day campaign. Thank you so much, as always, for your support and your partnership. Well, now we're joined by a leading voice on Israel and Zionism and peace. She's a former Knesset member, author of multiple books, including The War of Return and We Should All Be Zionists. It's my pleasure to welcome influential thought leader, Dr. Einat Wilf. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let me start off right off the bat. Why should we all be Zionists?
Well, the book makes several claims. The first, that Zionism has become a shorthand for confident Jewish identity. So as anti-Zionism takes an emotional toll from students on campuses, essentially demanding that they mutilate their Jewish identity as the price of belonging, a dynamic that I likened to bullying. I described it as demanding a constant pound of flesh. So I described how reclaiming a Zionist identity has helped Jews basically stave off the bullies, basically telling them nothing to look for here. You cannot shame me to mutilate my identity. I'm a proud Zionist. Go away. So We Should All Be Zionists is great for students on campus and anyone who wants to send the bullies away, just as a shorthand to say, I'm a confident Jew, nothing to look for here. The other aspect has to do with the conflict. Once you understand deeply that the conflict has only ever been about one thing and one thing only, the Arab and especially Palestinian complete rejection and denial of the Jewish right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland, aka Zionism, then it's understood that the only path to peace, to true peace, is one where the prism of the Arabs flips from white colonial invaders, which essentially says you're foreigners, get out of here, and it flips to say, actually, we get it, you belong here. The state of Israel is merely the political expression of your ancient connection with this land. So I call it Arab Zionism, which I say now sounds crazy and one day it won't. But it is the idea of an Arab and Islamic embrace of the Jewish right to self-determination. So in this case, if Arabs and Muslims are Zionists, we can finally have peace. And in general, I think it's one of the greatest, my pinned tweet says that Zionism is a progressive movement that had the misfortune of success because it turned victims into people who are self-possessed, masters of their fate. So I think Zionism in general is an inspirational movement that has pretty much something for everyone.
We'll come back to it, of course. Let's talk about the situation in Gaza. And of course, you're someone who's sounded the alarm for a long time, particularly about UNRWA. Tell us about UNRWA and what is the issue with UNRWA. And it certainly appears that Israel doesn't seem that it's going to work with UNRWA anymore. Is that the right approach?
The short answer is yes. It took me years to understand, but to crystallize it in one sentence, the best way to understand UNRWA is the arsonist that pretends to be the firefighter. So many say, oh, wow, they're putting off fires, but they don't. They're the ones lighting them. How? By essentially shielding the Palestinians from the consequences of their ideology of trying to destroy the Jewish state and sending them a message that says, you never have to come to terms with your defeat. You never have to come to terms with the existence of a Jewish state because your victory is merely delayed. So keep trying until there is no Jewish state. And that sounds like a grand statement that I'm making, but it's all in one word, return. A lot of people, when they hear that UNRWA kind of in the schools, that's the reason it exists, so that Palestinians can one day exercise their vision of return. People think that it is some soft nostalgia. Return is October 7th. Return was always imagined by Palestinians as a brutal invasion and triumph, even a desecration of the Jewish body. Texts of our Palestinians from the 50s and 60s include language of we'll tear their hearts out of their bodies, their fingernails for their limbs. And the reason you saw euphoria on October 7th, all across Gaza, in the West Bank, among Palestinians around the world and their collaborators and supporters, the euphoria was not breaking out of prison. We know it was a lie. It was revealed to be a lie, replaced by other lies. The euphoria was that on that day, through the GoPro cameras streamed live, Palestinians saw the realization of the vision of return for which they were groomed for in the UNRWA schools, by the UNRWA false naming them of refugees, even though no one in Gaza is a Palestine refugee. So they were groomed for that for decades. And on that day, they saw their vision of return realized in the GoPro cameras of the Hamas butchers. And UNRWA is the arsonist that lit the fire that erupted on that day.
And thankfully, that was a short-lived vision, but bad enough, certainly. And we know that certain UNRWA staff were also involved in all of that. How, you know, one of the phrases we use at Stand With Us is education is the road to peace. What does that look like in the Palestinian Authority, for instance, or the broader Arab world?
It's important to note that no people will ever be willing to educate their children against their core beliefs. It exists nowhere. So the issue is not just the education. The issue is that the education system of the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, in Jordan, in Syria, and Lebanon, and other places, is geared to support their core belief that the Jews have no right to a sovereign state in any part of the historical Jewish ancestral homeland. And that's what they educate their children for, that their children will be the generation that will finally realize the vision of from the river to the sea. So what needs to happen before education is that the Palestinians as a people will want to educate their children for something else. Right now they have no interest, and you can't force them to educate their children.
Can you incentivize it?
No. Actually, the incentive has to be the opposite. they need to understand for the first time in a century that they have been defeated in their goal of destroying the Jewish state, and that there is a direct connection of action and consequences, cause and effect, between their ideological choice to persevere for a century in the singular obsession of destroying the Jewish state and the ruin that they are now facing. Only then can they begin the kind of transformation that we saw in Nazi Germany, in Imperial Japan, that emerged from, as the name of a book about Japan from this period is called, Embracing Defeat.
Yeah.
Only once they go through this process, only when there is no more UNRWA to say to them, no, you have not been defeated, your victory is merely delayed, please try again. Only when there is none of that, and they have to come to terms with the consequences of their ideological choice, they can begin to change what they want and then educate their children according to a new ethos, which I call Arab Zionism.
What surprised you about October the 7th and also the global reaction to October the 7th?
So some aspects, of course, I was not surprised by the euphoria, by the fact that this is what they wanted, by the fact that this is what they were working on for years. I'm on the record in books, essays, lectures, meetings, going to various funders of UNRWA in the West, telling them, you are funding the Palestinian vision of no Jewish state. You may not think that that's what you're doing, but that's what you're doing. And certainly that's what the Palestinians think that you're doing. And you will not pay for it in Brussels or in Paris or in Berlin. My people will pay for it in blood. So the fact that this is what the Palestinians wanted, that this is what the people of Gaza were working on, that I was not surprised. Of course, I was surprised by the complete surprise of it, the failure of Israel to plan for it, to prepare for it, to be ready, the scale of it. But even with the butchery, the GoPro cameras, I was not surprised. In the book, The War of Return, we talk about how Arab atrocities, they were not called yet Palestinians, but the same people, Arab atrocities against Jews, burning them, mutilating them in 47, 48, were photographed. And the photographs were sold in the markets of the old city of Jerusalem. So the idea of taking pleasure, wanting to see the visuals of the desecration of Jewish bodies, merely got technologically updated, but nothing was new about the brutality of it and the desire to show it off. So this is kind of the surprise and not surprise of that day.
You mentioned the title of your book, The War of Return. What concrete steps should the world take to kind of break that conventional thinking about the law of return or the right of return for Palestinians, as they say?
Well, the best thing is to make it clear that there is no such thing, because there is no such thing. There is no right for a people to settle in another country in kind of against the will of that country. There is no such right.
We should clarify, we're talking about, were there a future Palestinian state, that some people have the right to return to Israel?
What they demand, Palestinians demand, is that regardless of whether or not they have a state, and again, the reason they don't have a state is that every time they were told you can have a state, but it means you don't get the Jewish state, the Jews will still have their state, they prefer to keep fighting for from the river to the sea. And return is merely synonymous with that. I've come to define this ideology as Palestinianism, which has 4 core tenets. From the river to the sea, there will be no Jewish state, and we are therefore perpetual refugees until we exercise return. And again, return is October 7th, and synonymous with undoing the Jewish state. So the best thing that the world can do is to take all these 4 core tenets and say, enough, that's it. There will be not from the river to the sea. The Jewish state will be. It's here to stay. The Jews are not foreign invaders. They are an ancestral people, an indigenous people in an ancestral land. They have the right to self-determination. You are not refugees. and you have no such thing as a right of return. Internalize that, and we can move forward.
What does real peace look like to you beyond a ceasefire?
Ceasefire is by definition not a real peace. If anything, the conflict can be described as a tragedy of ceasefires, in the sense that, again, every time the Arabs go to war with the ecstasy of annihilation, and again, it's their declarations, we will destroy the Jewish state, throw the Jews into the sea. Every time they go to an annihilationist war and fail, what they get is a ceasefire, rather than being forced to sign unconditional surrenders, accept their defeat, pay a price in territory, in compensation. So it's a tragedy of ceasefires, because that is part of the way that the conflict is constantly fueled, is essentially shielding the Arabs from consequences and telling them always, try again. So they are a logical people and they try again. So peace is definitely not a ceasefire. It's the opposite of that. Real peace comes when the Arabs of Gaza and the West Bank essentially let go of Palestinianism as a destructive ideology and become a people, like the Germans, like the Japanese, who have a positive ideology, an ideology that wishes to build next to the Jewish state, not from the river to the sea. When that happens, we can make all kinds of political arrangements, 2 states, 7 emirates. They want to be confederated with Jordan, with Egypt. All are possible political arrangements that become possible, but only after the century-long war that the Arabs, and especially the Palestine Arabs, have waged against the existence of a Jewish state in any part of the land.
We have seen encampments on campuses in the West. We've seen very shrill, dangerous even demonstrations. What's behind those, and what's the answer? What's the right response to them?
So what's behind them is a very dangerous process that I will even make perhaps the bold claim that has nothing to do with Israel and nothing to do with Palestinians. It's been something that I've followed for years, decades actually. I've come to call it the placard strategy, because you see it on placards, these signs in anti-Israel demonstrations. Everyone has seen them. These placards are ingeniously constructed as simple equations. One side of the equation says Israel, Zionism, Starve David. And the strategy has been so successful that even lovers of Israel will know that it doesn't say Zionism equals the political movement for self-determination of the Jewish people and their ancestral homeland. Granted, it's a long placard, but it would be the only accurate one. The placard strategy has been so successful that everyone knows what's on the other side of the equation. Imperialism, colonialism, racism, apartheid, then it escalates, ethnic cleansing, Nazism, genocide, Holocaust. If you're in America in 2020, it suddenly says white supremacy, which really gives you a clue to how the strategy works. The strategy works by choosing words that not only have no connection to reality, they are the inversion of reality. Zionism is the most decolonial, anti-imperial movement, salvaging Jews from apartheid, establishing the state of equal rights. So it's the inversion of reality. But those words are chosen because by now they are globally synonymous with evil. So the way that the placard strategy works is by creating this drip repetition. Israel, Zionism, Starve David equals evil. Israel, Zionism, Starve David equals evil. Now, it's not only in placards, it's in social media. You give an anti-Israel speaker 30 seconds on TV, regardless of the question, they'll say colonialism, apartheid, genocide. That's it. And they'll always insert it in their answer. It gets laundered. It gets laundered through international institutions. Who knows that the United Nations General Assembly is one lousy country, one vote? Very few people understand the system. So if the UN says that Zionism is racism, that means something. Recently, I saw a lecture by a Soviet operative that explained how you engage in mass manipulation. They talked about repetition, which the placard strategy does, strong visual symbols, which the placard strategy does. And then he said prestige. Prestige is key because prestige paralyzes judgment. That was the phrase. Prestige paralyzes judgment. So if you could get an organization that has the letters UN in it to say Zionism is racism, Israel's apartheid, genocide, then that has prestige and it will suspend the judgment. In academia, this gets laundered through academia. You'll get a PhD for Zionism is colonialism. You'll get tenured for Israel's an apartheid state. So you're talking about a 360 engulfment that creates this constant repetition. There is an evil out there. There's an evil out there. And it's not a coincidence that while all the evil words are associated with Israel, all the good words, liberation, justice, equality, rights, are associated with the erasure of the collective Jew, Palestinianism. That explains what some people are confounded by. Queers for Palestine, feminists for Palestine. Palestine is about fighting climate change. Palestine is worker rights. People say that makes no sense if anyone knows anything about reality. But there is actually a powerful logic here because Palestine has become the abstract marker of erasing the collective Jew. And after October 7th, a new placard appeared, and I always noticed them. That's why I saw white supremacy in 2020. It said, "Keep the world clean," with an image of a Star of David or a flag of Israel in a trash bin. And keep the world clean is one of the oldest ideas in general, and especially when it comes to Jews. It basically posits that there's a utopia. There's a beautiful, clean world for us to have. And the only thing that stands between us, this dirty, messy world, and utopia is the collective Jew, which needs to be placed in the trash bin by any means necessary. So this erupts on campuses, among other places, because this is where the laundering has taken place, the prestige, the legitimacy for the idea that Israel, Zionism, Star of David equals evil. And so many young people today, perhaps always, have their entire identity tied up in the notion that they are good people. They are good people. They want to do good things. They want a better world. And they are surrounded by this drip, repetition message. There is a better world out there, a world of justice, equality, rights, fighting climate change, worker rights, queer rights. And that world is about ridding us ourselves of the collective Jew. But to them, it's presented as supporting Palestine. But again, it's about the erasure from the river to the sea. You even see actively, it's a project of erasure, erasing certain elements of Wikipedia, hijacking Jewish history and erasing it to have someone else uptake it. So this is what we're seeing on campuses. We're seeing the very steady, methodical process that has been built for years and decades to equate Israel and Zionism with evil and with achieving utopia by ridding the world of the collective Jew, which is presented as supporting Palestine.
I want to give mention to your book. We have it here. It's in Hebrew, Shiva B'October, which is a play on words, both the 7th, but also return.
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
So this book essentially updates the War of Return, which came out in Hebrew in 2018 and in English in 2020. It essentially crystallizes a lot of the insights that we've gathered, my co-writer Adi Schwartz and I, that we've gathered in the last 7 years, in essentially bringing the message of the book to diplomats and journalists and academics around the world. The idea of Palestinianism is part of the crystallization that appears here. And of course, it's updated for October 7th and makes the case, as the name and the cover suggest, that October 7th is the realization of the Palestinian vision of return, that the reason that all of Gaza was turned over years by diverting resources into a single integrated, weaponized landscape for the singular purpose of destroying what the Jews have built, rather than building a state of Palestine that lives next to a Jewish state, that all that comes from the same ideology that presented through return, but is essentially about the erasure and denial of the Jewish right to self-determination in the land.
And out soon in English as well.
We're working on it, yes.
Great. We look forward to that. One final question. Are you optimistic in general about the future of Israel and the Jewish people?
So I always say that I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic because I'm not a passive agent. I very much see myself as someone who is active in Jewish history. For me, that is the most inspirational thing about Zionism. It's being active in history. It's taking some of the worst cards ever dealt and really building something spectacular from them. I am amazed by the people of Israel. I am amazed by the Jewish mobilization and the mobilization of many non-Jewish supporters for Israel. We have a lot to work with. If I'm allowed, we will need different leadership for that to happen. But as they say, tough times create strong leaders, and strong leaders create good times. That's what I think and hope will happen for us.
So much to take from your words today. Thank you so much for your incisive analysis and for your leadership on the world stage. Dr. Einat Wilf, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, marking a new milestone in advanced defense technology, Israel has announced the deployment of the world's first operational laser-based air defense system. Recently deployed in northern Israel, it successfully intercepted drones launched by Hezbollah from Lebanon. Substantially cheaper than existing defense technologies, including the Iron Dome, which will still remain. This is a major step forward in protecting Israeli skies with speed, precision, and a beam of light. Don't forget, it's Stand With Us Day, our anniversary, and donations to Stand With Us are doubled. If you'd like to make a difference, go to StandWithUs.com, click on Stand With Us Day, and watch your donation get doubled. We can do so much more with your support. Please support us on Stand With Us Day. We're sending love to the Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters and allies worldwide, and our prayers for every hostage to be back home with their families soon. Together, we will prevail. Thanks for watching. Am Yisrael Chai.